Hello everyone, in this video we would be looking at aggregation in SQL. Now, aggregation in SQL is the task of collecting a set of values to return a single value. Alright, it is done with the help of aggregate functions such as sum, count, average, max, and mean. Alright, so for example, in a database of products, you might want to calculate the average price of the whole inventory. So simply put, aggregation, when you hear aggregation, it means you want to compress number of items or whatever, right, into one figure, into a single value. So in a case where I want to be able to get the count or the total number of people that are watching this session or this video, right? I know that yes, we would have one person in Lagos, one person in Abuja, another person in Kwara that is watching this video, right? When I want to aggregate these people, I want to have a single count, right? I want to know the total number of people watching this video, right? So it will give me a total count, which is one value. So I've been able to compress, or I've been able to add up one person from Lagos, one person from Abuja, one person from Kwara to give me 3 people that are watching the video, right? That's one value. I've been able to return a single value, an aggregated value. That's what aggregation means, right? So it says aggregation in SQL is typically used in conjunction with grouping. Very important. So the group by clause is used to arrange rows into groups in SQL. Aggregation together with grouping is key to generating quick reports and insight from a database. Very, very, very important. So what we are going to be looking at today is count, sum, average, minimum, max. These are basic aggregated functions. These are basic aggregate functions that we use in SQL. It's very, very, very important that we are conversant with this functions. Very important. So this is the basic syntax for aggregation in SQL. Select column 1, aggregate function must be beside the column 2, and then if you want to group, remember, for you to use an aggregate function, a group by clause must also be used, right? So if you want to group by, you group by the column that is close to your aggregate function. Very important. Now, before we'll see how we'll try all this, we'll work with this example since we are working with our Chinook database, and we'll explore all this in our DBMS, right, called SQLite. Now let's head over to our DBMS, and then we'll see how we can import and get our Chinook database file into our DBMS called SQLite. So I'm sure that if you are watching this video now, you must have gone through downloading your DB browser SQLite, and also you must have downloaded your database file into your local computer. These are the 2 prerequisites for you to be able to watch this video. Now I have my DB browser downloaded on my desktop, right? I'll double click, and then we have this page where we'll be able to import our database file, or create new database, or open database, or open project, as the case may be. So we have file, we have edit, we have view, we have tools, we have help button, we have new database. Let's say we want to create our new database, we can. Let's say we want to open our database file or whatever, we can as well. Let's say we want to open a project that we've worked on before, we can as well. So we also have database structure, browse data, edit pragmas, execute SQL. So we're going to see all this as we move on. So first things first, let's go to get our database file that we have downloaded into our local PC. I'll go to my open database, and then I remember I stored it in a folder called data file in my documents. So I'll go to data file academy, and then I'll go into my SQLite tools, and this is my database file called Chinook. So I'll open, and then Once I open, notice we now have our database file imported already, right? And if you notice, in our database file called the Chinook database, we have 11 tables, album, artist, and all the way to track, right? And then this is basically the syntax when we were trying to create the tables, right? So we'll treat all this as we move on. And then this is indices. This is basically where we see the foreign key and how they are being related, right? So in this table called album table, we have a foreign key called artist ID, right? So in this table called customer table, we have a foreign key called support rep ID. So basically, by now, I'm sure that everybody understands what primary key and foreign key are, right? Primary key is the unique identifier column that represents a table, right? And then a foreign key is when that primary key is in another table, right? So that's the idea. So in this sense, once we have an album table, we have a foreign key called artist ID. So meaning this artist ID would also have a table where it is a primary key, right? And I'm sure that we have an artist table, right? Yes, exactly. You see? So we have an artist table. So meaning the primary key here would be an artist ID. That's the idea. So we also have browse data, so you can actually view your data, you can actually view your tables here and see the content of each table using your browse data. So I can be able to choose another table called, okay, I've chosen genre. I can choose playlist table. See, I've seen my playlist ID with my primary key and then the playlist name. So you can do whatever things you want by selecting different tables and at least get used to your tables, right? And then this is where we'll be able to write in our SQL syntax and queries. So with that, let's head over to our examples and then let's look at some aggregation in SQL. So before we start, let me do aggregation in SQL. So now, yeah, fantastic. So let me talk about this. So what I did here is what we call single line commenting, right? So in the sense where I want to have like a description above my query, right? For me to do that, I need to put in a single line comment, right? So that SQL, when I want to run my query, SQL will understand that this is not part of my query, right? Then you can also, so let's head back to our classroom. So what do we want to do? We want to be able to, okay, let's first of all put our basic syntax column, or rather information on our DBMS so we would be guided. So I'll paste this. Now there's also what we call multiple line commenting, right? Multiple line commenting means, let's say I don't have the strength to always come here to do this, double hyphen, then come here, double hyphen, right? Instead of doing this, instead of doing this, I can just come here and then do your vertical bar, or rather your slant bar, and then shift 8. See, notice that everything has been commented out immediately, right? And then we need to close this, shift 8 and then slant bar. So we've been able to close our commenting so that any other thing that we write would SQL will understand that this is basically your query, right? That's why we had to close it here. Now let's go. What do we want to do? So our first example is so it says the Chinook database is a sample database that represents a music store containing tables like artists, albums, tracks, invoices, etc. Yeah, let's explore some examples using the Chinook database. Now let's try to use aggregation and then explore examples. Remember guys, your aggregate functions must work with your group by clause. It's very important. So let's say we want to do this, copy, then paste. Now let me also single line comment this. We don't need that. So it says count the number of customers from each country. So guys, let's do this again. So now first thing first, the ask is we want to be able to count the number of customers from each country. So now first thing I'll do is I'll do my select all, right? So what this all means is I want to see all the columns. Select asterisk, select all. I want to see all columns regarding the table I want to add, right? So now I'll do select all from what table. So looking at this question, it says count the number of customers from each country. So I want to get each customer. So where is my customer located? In my customer table. So that is the table I'm interested in from customer. So my customer table, and then I put my semicolon, then let's highlight and then run. Let's see. So once I run this, I'm seeing all the columns regarding my customer table, right? I'm seeing everything. Now it says count the number of customers from each country, right? So now for we to do this, we need to take cognizance of our customer ID, because each customer has a unique identifier, right? So Luis Goncalves is a customer that has an ID 1. It's not going to be repetitive because Luis is unique. Luis will not have a duplicate. Luis will definitely have a brother, but not him as a brother, right? So that's the idea. So we want to get the count of customers that hail from different countries. That's basically what we want to do. Right, so now in that sense, for we to do that, we need to have an aggregated function called count. So anytime you hear how many, number of, count the number of, remember that you need to use an aggregated function called count to help you do that. Right, so the first thing we will do is we will do select. So let's say we do select count. So you can as well use asterisks, and also you can as well use your customer ID, because what do you want to count, right? The question says count the number of customers, and the number of customers are denoted by our customer ID, right? So I can come and say customer ID, and I can also do asterisks. I like using my customer ID. Count customer ID as. So let's leave the as, right? So you would understand what this as means as we move on. As is what we call aliases, right? You understand all this as we move on. So select count ID from customer. Let's try this. Let's run this, guys. Now, in this sense, we have 59 customers, right? What this means is we have 59 customers. But now, remember the ask is saying, so I want to now get by each country, I want to see the customers that came from different countries, that bought our product or bought our albums from different countries. Hence why we said, remember the ask is, whenever you are using an aggregation in your select statement, you must group by. And for you to group by, you need to have another column by the side of your aggregated function that you would group by. So in this sense, I want to be able to group by country. I want to see by different countries, give me the count of customers, right? So I'll do select country, right? And then come here. Remember, our group by must be used. Group by, we always group by. Looking at this syntax, guys, looking at this, we always group by the first column before your aggregate function, right? So that's what we are doing. So group by country. I think we have what we want. If you look, we have everything just the same way this is. We have select country. Our aggregate function is count in this case, and then what we are counting is our customer ID, right? So you can as well use asterisks, no problem. But I always like using, when I'm using my count, I like using my primary key column, right? Then from our table name here is customer, then group by your column 1, which is always behind your aggregate function. That is what we did here, right? So if I run this, then watch. All right, guys, hope you can see. We now have, by different countries, we can now get the count of our customers. Right, so for Argentina, we have just one customer. For Australia, we have one customer. For Austria, we have one customer. So what I mean by alias when I was saying alias is that instead of having this column name to be what we calculated, right, we can as well just give it something like as number of customers, something like this. So this is what we mean by alias. So this AS is what we call alias. So it helps us rename our column name if we have done like a calculation in our select statement, because this is like we having an aggregated calculation here, right? We aggregated our customer ID to give us the count of customer ID 1, which is when we started, we got 59, and then we shredded it by different countries. We grouped that customer or customer total by different countries, right? So we can as well do it like this, right? Once we run this, see, now our column name is no longer count customer ID, it's now number of customers, right? Yep. So we can do it like this, and then we come, because we still have, guys, this is another function that we'll learn, another syntax that we'll learn as we move on. We call it sorting, right? And when you want to sort, you use your order by. So if I want to have more insight by checking what country has the highest number of customers, I can come and sort using my order by number of customers, descending. So we would look at all this when we get to sorting in SQL, right? Once you put your descending, it means that you want the highest to be the top, right? But if I don't put anything here, this will sort automatically in an ascending order. Let's say I put my DSC keyword, then I select, then I run. Wow. So we have 13 customers that came from USA, 8 customers that bought our album from Canada, 5 customers from France. So it's now sorting our number of customers column in a descending order. So that is that. So we've used one aggregated function called count to answer this question, right? So let's go to the second ask. So let's do our normal routine, Ctrl C, and then we'll paste, Ctrl V, and then we'll do our single line commenting, which I know everybody is conversant with now. So let's explain this. So it says calculate the total sales for each invoice. Now you need to understand sales. Do we have any table like sales? I'm not sure. Let me go to browse data. We don't have any sales table, right? Let's go back to execute. So how do we now calculate total sales when we don't have a sales table for each invoice? So let's check. I think we have a table called invoice, right? So let's check invoice. So let's see if we have, okay. I think this is the table we are going to use. Why? Because we have a column called total. So if you can get the sum of this, right? Because the question says calculate the total sales for each invoice. Guys, each invoice. So if we can get the total sales per each invoice ID, then it will be fantastic, right? That is that. So let's check. Let's go. So let's go. So the first thing we need to do, as I always like doing, select all from invoice. Alright. So why do I like doing this? Let's say we don't have, maybe you are using another DBMS and you don't have the option of browsing your data to see your table first, to have an information about your table and the ask and the question at hand, right? Let's say you don't have this option. So I always encourage to do select asterisk from your table, so you'll be able to view your table first, so you understand your ask. So in this sense, we've been able to do that. I would say, okay, I now know that I have a column called total, right? So I can come and say, okay, select star, and then I want to get the sum of this total column, right? Then if I do this, let me run this first. Let's see what will happen. basically don't need this select all. You notice that if you do select all, it means that you still need all your columns, right? So I don't need this. I just want to get the sum total, right? I want to get the total of this column, my total column initially. So once I run this, see? So we now have, it's telling us that once you sum total, right, it's giving you a total of $2,328.6 euros, naira, as the case may be, right? So now, but remember the question says calculate the total sales for each invoice. So, and we said for you using an aggregate function, you must always use a group by. So we have to have a column that we would group by, right? So in that sense, I would say we need to add invoice ID, because it says for each invoice, and what denotes invoice is our invoice ID, right? So invoice ID, comma, then we'll come group by invoice ID. Remember our syntax, guys. Remember our syntax. Always select column aggregate function. In this case, our aggregate function is our sum, and then our column 2 is our total, right? Then from table, we used invoice, and then we are grouping by the column behind our aggregate function, which is basically our invoice ID. Right? Exactly. So I think we are good to go. So once we run this, now notice that per each invoice, it is giving us the sum total. Right? Per each invoice, it is giving us the sum total invoice amount. Now, instead of having our sum total, we can still have an alias, right, to give us total sales, right? So instead of this, we might put it, join it together, or we might actually have strings to separate to make SQL understand that, please, this is just a string, right? So once I run this, if you run this, now you see we have a space because we fixed our quote, double quote, and then it's now more descriptive. So with that, we've been able to look at several basic aggregation functions or aggregated functions, such as sum, count, and also the use of group by to complement or in conjunction with our aggregate functions. It's very important that so far you are using your aggregate functions, whether count, whether sum, whether max, whether average, in your select statement, right? It is very important that after your from clause, you must put a group by clause. It is very important. So far there's an aggregate function in your select statement, there must be a group by function. Very important. So with this, let's check. I think we are done. So with this, guys, we've come to the end of this video. So in summary, we've been able to look at aggregation in SQL, and we've been able to look at how we can use several basic aggregate functions like count, sum, and the rest, right? So I will see you on the next one. So have a lovely session, lovely video when you see this. So take care, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.